If you came to me for a lesson, my first lesson with you is no charge. Now, that's because I believe, one, you're already nervous and uncomfortable taking a lesson. So I can't get as much out of you the first time as I can in future lessons. I don't charge you for the first lesson so that you can see what we can do and then build off of that. Since I started that about 8 years ago, I have never had a student not come back.
Wow. Because they're feeling guilty?
No, I think they understand that they see improvement, but they already know they were nervous because they were trying to impress me with what they could do.
Hi, this is B.J. Barger from Alexandria, Virginia. In addition to joining Fred on an awesome Golf Smarter adventure to Prague, I'm a member at Laurel Hill Golf Club, and I play lots of golf with LPGA amateurs and American singles golf. This is Golf Smarter number 877.
Legendary instructor Manuel de la Torre's disciple on the definition of a swing with Gary Sowinski.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred
Welcome
Green.
to the Golf Smarter podcast, Gary.
Hello, Fred. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's great to get you onto the show. I've been following your website, and you had something on there that really jumped out at me because I think we need to all learn a little bit more about Manuel de la Torre. And apparently you were one of his students.
I worked for Manuel for just over 6 years. I spent, and to kind of give you the funny part, I met him at 7:45 every morning. He had his 2 pieces of toast and his coffee with cream. We talked about golf swings until 8 o'clock. He went to teach. I would take care of the golf shop and then teach. He would critique my lessons when we had lunch between 11 and 11:30. Then he would go back to teach. I would go back to running the shop and teaching. Then when we had dinner between 5 and 5:30, he critiqued what he saw in other lessons. And then in the evening, when from 6 o'clock till roughly 9 or 9:30, when he taught non-members, I stood there, watched him teach, and then we would sit in the golf shop till sometimes close to midnight talking about golf swings.
I've had
days.
mentors like that. Yeah, I've had mentors like that myself, and they're priceless. Where was this?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the Milwaukee Country Club.
Okay. And what were you doing before you got that job?
Well, I had just gotten out of the Army, and I was only 20, I'm going to say 23 or so. I was one of the last of the draftees, and
Nice.
I wanted to get into the golf business, and the golf professional at the club where my parents were members said, I know a guy you should go to work for. And he made a phone call. I had an interview with Manuel and a couple other golf professionals in Milwaukee. And Manuel called me and he said, would you like to come to work for me? And I said, definitely. And kind of from the rest of my life, it's all history from there on.
And what did you know about him before you got to meet him?
I just knew that he had a reputation in Milwaukee as being one of the finest teachers and running the finest country club in Milwaukee. So to me, that was kind of alluring because you were going to work at a very high-end quality facility for somebody who had a great reputation.
Yeah. Why is it important that most instructors and all amateur golfers should know more about his teaching, his book? Why is Manuel so important and special?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons. I think his concept of how the golf club actually moves, how the body is responsive to that action. You know, if you were to talk to people about how they do certain things, everybody would tell you how they move the tool. You ask somebody, how do you pound this nail in? They say, well, I take the hammer here and I move the hammer there and it hits the nail. They don't tell you, you bend your elbow 45 degrees, you move your wrist, you turn your hip. And Manuel's concept, which he learned directly from Ernest Jones and then Manuel's father, and Manuel kind of tweaked it down the road, I think mainly because of the equipment changes. But it teaches you how to use the tool that you have in your hands. And if you were to ask somebody to teach a child to take an egg and turn it over in the pan, they would say, well, you take the spatula, you slide it under the egg, and you turn the spatula over. Okay, you're teaching somebody how to move the tool. Nowadays, when you listen to somebody talk about the golf swing, they talk about all of these angles. So now let's go back to the child learning how to flip the egg. What do you think it would be like if you said, slide the spatula under the egg, raise your shoulder 2.1 inches, rotate your elbow, rotate your wrist, and then turn your hand? That's how people are trying to teach golf. And to me, it's impossible to do, and it just does not help people become better with the game.
Does that kind of instruction work better with a more skilled player who understands the nuance in their own swing?
And I don't think so. I think teaching people how to use the golf club, it involves things that we do in day-to-day life. It involves your visualization, and it involves a commitment to do something. If you visualize where you're going to move the golf club, that's where you'll move it. If you don't know where the club is, you can't move it where it has to go. So if my body is only trying to move, I'm not focused on the golf club. And I tell students, and it's kind of funny at times, I tell them, when you drive down the freeway, you're looking at where you're going, so you're committed to a certain direction. You're looking in a rear view mirror and you're observing traffic or somebody weaving in and out of traffic. So you're paying attention to that. So when you swing the golf club, you're observing where the club is while it's moving, but yet you're committed to where you have to move it. So we do these things in everyday life, so they're not as complicated as people think they are. It just takes a little bit of time to understand how you do it.
I see. And Manuel's father was also a famous teacher, Angel, right?
Yes. Angel's father learned directly from Ernest Jones in New York. And then he actually, when you saw that little excerpt, swing the thing, that's actually something that there was a lady named Pam Higgins who was taking a lesson from Manuel's father, and she was struggling with something and said to Angel, I can't do that. And Angel was a little bit perturbed with her and said with his Spanish accent, Pamela, don't tell me you can't do it, just swing the thing. And then that's where kind of the swing is the thing little excerpt came from.
Oh, that's really a good one. So that's a great story.
It's all family related, I guess you would say.
Right, exactly. That's a great story. So Manuel taught thousands and thousands of golfers, and he worked with so many different people and had a tremendous amount of success. He was just such a great teacher. And again, I think we haven't mentioned it yet, but he was on Golf Smarter before he passed away, and early on, and he's already we've replayed it on our Golf Smarter Mulligans show. And I love when people come out and like, well, wait a minute, I've studied with him. He was my mentor. And he left a long legacy behind him of great golfers.
Yes, he has. And, it's one of those funny things. When I go to practice, I laugh nowadays when I go to practice because sometimes people ask me, what are you practicing? And And I just tell them my swing. And they go, what part? And I go, my swing. And it's hysterical because everybody, for some crazy reason, looks at a golf swing in segments. And Manuel was a firm believer that, yes, there are things that go on. There are things, so to speak, that we have no control over. But the swing is a complete action. And when you produce the complete action from start to finish, you can't stop halfway through and say, this is wrong, I have to fix that. You're already committed to where the swing is going or what you're doing, and you just do it.
Fascinating. Oh, we're going to talk more about this, about your teaching, and about Manuel de la Torre, and highly advise people, look him up. You'll learn a ton. We're going to take a quick time out, though, and we'll be back and talk more with Gary Sowinski right after this. It's interesting when you were saying just a minute ago about people saying, what part of your swing? Why do we think that the swing is not one fluid motion, but a series of segments? What got in the average golfer's mind to make them think that way?
The video in technology. You wouldn't ask somebody when they're driving their car, if you videoed that drive, you would not ask them, what part of driving were you concerned with? So people nowadays, and this becomes, for me, it becomes one of the funny parts, is when you look at video, you see things that aren't really quite true. And this boggles people's mind.
Yeah, like, wait a minute.
Well,
what?
If you're using, and I say it with respect to iPhone or any phone, if you're shooting with a phone, or it's taking only so many, quote, frames per second. So there is a degree of distortion there. Now, if we start to look at the reality of a golf swing, the golf club has the furthest distance to travel, and the body has the shortest distance to travel. So if you got to the top of your backswing, and I'm just going to say you moved your body at the same time you moved the club, your body would finish that circular action before the club. So what happens is when you get to the ball, your body is turned, and I'm going to give you a quick random percentage here, 25% further than the club. So everybody now says that the body turned first. But if everything was to move in the same direction at the same time, or very close to it, the body, because it has the shortest distance to travel, finishes first. Much like if you can try to imagine when you look at a track meet, when they're starting at all the different lanes, the person who is on the inside starts further back than the person on the outside of the track. Well, after so many laps, they're now equal. If you look at when you watch a marching band at a football game, and they're doing a big loop or a rotary type action, the person in the middle just stands there. They don't have far to go. That poor guy on the end is running like heck to keep up with everybody else.
And he's carrying a tuba.
And he's carrying a tuba or the bass. That's right. But, see, that's where people, they see things, but they don't understand what happens. You hear also, there's a term, a kinematic sequence. Everybody likes to throw that out. It's nothing more than pretty much a sequence that says if you do something in one direction, when you change the direction, it's the opposite chain of events. So if you were to imagine hitting a nail with a hammer, you took the hammer away, then your wrist bends, then your forearm moved, and then your upper arm moved. So now when you're going to hit make the hammer hit, the upper arm move, the forearm, the wrist, and then the hammer return. But the key is your upper arm moved because you wanted the hammer to get back to the nail. And because you're going to move it, it happens in the opposite chain of events. So now when you analyze a golf swing, the backswing pretty much starts what I'm going to refer to as from the top. Your hand starts swinging the club back, then your arms and your shoulders, and all of that follows. Then your torso turns, then your hip turns, then your thighs turn, then your knees turn, your calves turn, and your ankles turn, and your feet move. But you always hear people say, look at how he used his hips to start the swing. You don't start it in the middle. You can't start it in the middle because now you've thrown that entire sequence into pandemonium. So that's where a lot of the problems start. Now, if we go one step beyond that and you think of every athletic action that there is, the person who is in balance always wins. The person out of balance loses. Now, your body and my body and everybody's body is built very much the same way, which is it's built to counterbalance. So, if you lean forward, your butt goes backward. If you take your hip and push it to the left, the upper portion of your body tilts back to the right. So the minute you do that, you're out of balance. So if you're out of balance, how do you get the club back to where it started? You're in trouble. But if you stand there, turn with the club, and return the club, you will stay in balance. So that's a huge portion of what the concept was built on, being in balance and being able to generate the speed required to, as Manuel would refer it, propel the ball in the proper direction.
How do we use visualization? You talked about visualization. How do we use that to enhance and groove our swing?
Well, when you understand the positions of the club, and golf is built very much around both physics and geometry. So you hear people say that he's going to move the club straight back. Well, when the club is on an angle, it can't go straight back or it moves further away from you. So the club makes an arc. So if you can imagine, when the club sits at an angle, there are tangents on the shaft line. Those tangents are straight, but they're also tilted. So the club moves on that arc and it moves circularly. So when the club gets to hip high, the shaft of the club is parallel to the intended ball flight line. The toe of the club then points to the sky. So then when the club returns, it returns pretty much, we'll call it, over that same direction and continues to the other side, so it becomes the mirror image. So the shaft is parallel to the intended line with the toe pointing to the sky. So what you do then is, and I'll kind of make it short, when you get to the top of the backswing, the toe points toward the ground. You return the club, visualizing it at the target, toe up, and you just swing it there. I mean, it sounds simple, but you use your arms to put it there, and you allow the body to just turn and follow that action because the golf swing is circular. There are no straight lines in a circular action, so when people start talking about doing things in a straight line, you already know you're in trouble.
And I think the circular part is also confounding to a lot of people. Just understanding that circle part.
It is, but if you were to, and I'm just going to say, tell somebody to swing a baseball bat, they would swing it at chest high right around their body. Right. So then you just tell them, okay, now take that baseball swing and bend over 25%. They can make the same swing. And then you say, bend over further until the end of the baseball bat touches the ground and make the same swing. And then they tell you, well, how do I do that? It's because golf people keep trying to make people think that the golf swing is so unique, but it really isn't any different than any other swinging action. It goes backward and forward. It goes one side to the other. There's not a lot of manipulation required.
Right. We're going to take another time out.
Okay.
We'll be back.
I'll be here.
Right after this. In teaching people how to play golf versus teaching people how to hit a golf ball, well, let's break that down first of all. Is there a difference?
No. And I don't even teach people to hit a golf ball. See,
Okay, in teaching people how to play golf and teaching people how to swing a golf club, am I getting closer?
yes, there's no difference.
Okay.
Here's the very, very uniqueness of it. You teach people how to move a golf club. Then you teach them that, we'll say, and we're going to go now just to the shorter part of the game, pitching wedges and less. Then you teach them that the size of the swing determines how far the ball goes. So there is no, like, 3/4 is going to send it a certain distance. That's all touch and feel. And people learn that each swing has a different distance that they can hit the golf ball. So you teach them just to make swings and you allow the golf ball to get in their way. And what I tell people too is, don't listen to the announcers on golf TV. Because, see, they say something to me, especially in, I'll call it the short game, that I find to be pretty funny. A player hits a wedge from, we'll just say, 80 yards, and he hits it 10 feet left of the hole but pin high. And they say that he has great distance control. He takes a putt from 30 feet and hits it up there a foot from the hole, and they tell you that he has great speed. See, speed, a player does not control the speed of the ball. He controls a swing that's going to propel the ball from point A to point B. He doesn't control the speed. So I've asked a couple announcers, how come when a guy hits a wedge, you don't say he had great speed control? And they'd look at you kind of confused. But again, some of the things that announcers say on TV to me are flowery things, but they hurt the average golfer because they're not allowing the golfer to understand what happens. So
Right, but they're not there to give instruction. They're there reporting on what they're watching. And I think we take it sometimes we take it to, is the word seriously? I mean, with like, oh, okay, so, whoa, he did that on TV, so I can go do that because now I watched him do that.
That's right. And that's like they say, I laughed the other day. I was watching something and the player was on the side of the green and you could see the club face wide open and he hit this shot and shot the ball straight up in the air. And they said, look at how he hoisted that in the air.
Oh, gosh, no.
No. But then I'm watching, the very next day, I'm watching Tiger hit some shots at the PNC, and he's got the blade wide open. And it was the first time I actually heard an announcer say something correct. Is he said, look at the speed that he's swinging that club at to put the spin on the ball to make it stop. Now, I thought that was fantastic. So, you know, there again, it all becomes you manufacturing a swing and learning how that swing with certain lofts of the club propels the ball certain distances.
Are we putting too much focus on mechanics?
Yes, by far. A golf swing is an artistic action. It's not a technologically manufactured thing. When you look at everybody, I mean, if you and I stood next to each other, we have different heights, strengths, weaknesses, degrees of mobility, so all of our bodies move differently. Yet we can all move the golf club through certain, I'll say, places and produce the same action. I mean, when you look on guys who've played the tour, you look at, I'll just say, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, Lee Trevino, Nick Faldo. You look at Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth. You look at all of those swings. They don't all look the same because everybody has different physical characteristics. I mean, you look at the Ray Floyds of years ago. All of those swings had different movements, but they all propelled the ball in the same direction. So their bodies moved differently, but they moved the golf club correctly. They moved the club through certain places and always got back to square. Jim Furyk, there's another case. But if you look at his golf club at the top of the backswing and you look at it past the ball, it's in perfect positions. So teaching people how the golf club moves is far more important than the mechanics of the body movement. This is something that all of your listeners can do. I could guarantee to you right now exactly what they're going to see. So have everybody take out a piece of paper and a pen, write just their first name in cursive, then directly over where they wrote it, write it a second time, not above or below, directly over it, and then write it a third time. And then when you look at that signature, tell me why along the way you see 3 different lines.
I'm looking at it right now. Why do I see 3 different versions of the signature?
Yeah.
I give up. Where are you going with that?
Nobody can produce the same action exactly the same way.
Okay, good.
So you see, that's the, quote, biomechanics that people try to do. You can't produce that. But if you took those signatures and superimposed them next to each other, you couldn't see the difference in them.
Yeah.
So how many times in your life have you signed your first name?
Many.
Yeah. So that's the part that people miss out on. Everybody tries to look at things and try to figure out how to do things, but there are just some things that you can't reproduce exactly the same. And that's why a golf ball that's hit, it's hit, we're going to call it straight. But that straight, when it comes down, might be 2 or 3 yards to the right, or 5 yards to the right or left of a previous swing. But they're all within that acceptable range. That's how you move a golf club. You accept certain things being as close to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and thinking that every swing needs an analysis of what happened, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's like, I find that very frustrating when I play with people and they have to comment on every single swing. And it's like, no, let's comment about the results. Let's, once the ball leaves your club face, you can't tell me that it was something that you did. It's just going to be,
I jokingly,
you don't even know how to analyze it.
Yeah, and I jokingly, when you talk about playing golf and teaching it like that, is I actually have a couple students that I've got them to understand, and it was an old-time TV show called Get Smart. But
oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, I thought so. When you hit a shot, the doors close. And now you go to the next one. Because I got a student, a pretty young one, and I actually asked him this. I said, the shot you just hit is history. The next shot is the future, and the swing that you're making is the present. I said, you cannot fix or change history. You cannot control the future. You can only do what's correct in the present, and if what you do is correct in the present, the future will be fine.
That's a good one.
And that got through to the student very rapidly. And now they don't care about the shot that they just hit that's bad. They're focused on the one they're about to hit. And so now there's a whole change in their mindset and the mental aspect of playing.
I did one the other day to somebody, And he's like, every time I play this hole, I hit the ball in the water. I said, so before you swing, do you want me to stand behind you and go, don't hit the ball in the water? He's like, no, of course not. I said, then why would you do that to yourself?
That's right.
I mean, if you don't want me to do it, why would you do it to yourself?
Well,
it's counterproductive.
Playing a practice round with Manuel a long time ago with a tour player that he was teaching, it was pretty funny. We got to one hole, and the tour player said, I struggle with this hole all the time. And Manuel said, why? And they said, well, look, you got water all the way down the left-hand side of the fairway. And if you go to the right, it can catch all of those pine needles and go out of bounds. And Manuel looked at me and looked at them and said, I think the golf course architect has already told you where to go. And the student said, what do you mean? And he said, well, just anywhere in that green patch down the middle of the fairway. And they said, oh my gosh. I mean, we all look for where we don't want to go, but say to become better, you just focus on where you're going.
Exactly. All right, we're going to take another time out. Or back to our Get Smart reference.
Yeah.
Would you believe it's time for another commercial? We'll be right back. This week on Golf Smarter Mulligans is a great compliment to this episode you're listening to right now. Our guest is Rick Koscher, and he talks about your body position and how it affects your ball flight.
Whenever you learn anything, and I don't care what it is, you learn how to talk, you learn how to walk, you learn how to swing a club, you learn how to play an instrument, your brain develops certain neurological patterns that become cast in concrete over time. There's a myelin filament that actually develops over these neurological patterns that insulates those patterns so they become more ingrained. So when we talk about muscle memory, we're really talking about these ingrained neurological patterns that fire in a specific sequence. When I'm going to rework your golf swing, I have one of two choices. I can get in your brain and scrape all that stuff off, your current neurological patterns, so I can change them, or I can change and create new patterns.
That's Golf Smarter Mulligans, episode 193, featuring the golf better coach, Rick Koscher. Now, this was originally a members-only episode, so even if you've been listening to Golf Smarter for a long time, this is the first time this episode is being released publicly. Please subscribe for free to our sister podcast that revisits the best of the Golf Smarter podcast called Golf Smarter Mulligans, being released every Friday from wherever you're listening right now. I want to get back to Manuel de la Torre for just a moment, because you said something before about how when you spent those long days together, which just sounds heavenly, that he would sit with you for a while and talk about what you did at the lesson that you were giving.
Right.
I'd love to be the fly on the wall on one of those conversations. Can you remember the kind of things that you discussed with him?
Yeah, it would be like you would have a student who was hitting, just say, a shank. And you're trying to figure out, because at the time, you never really understood what it was like. So you would say, well, I was trying to do this. And then Manuel would say, well, wait a minute now. What are the positions of a club face for a shank? So you would say, well, it's dead shut, or it can be this. And he said, that's right. Now, he said, tell me what would cause those things. So you would then say, well, if he's going to get it dead shut, it could come from his hands. If he did and started with his shoulders, it could have done that. Or if the club face was straight, he could have had too much weight on his heels, and then the speed of the swing pulled him toward his toes, which moves the club out, and he hits it in the hosel and hits a shank. And Manuel says, okay, so now if you knew those things, what were you trying to do? And you would say, well, I was, and then you think for a second and you go, whoa, I got caught up trying to fix the result instead of me being the teacher and looking for which one of those three causes it was. And then you would say, I see. And he'd say, well, you see, that's why as you're teaching, he said, you don't get caught up with the results. you continually look at the action and see if that action or how close that movement of the club is to what it's supposed to be. And then he said you can peek at a few, but he said you need to train your mind and your eye to see the action. Then when you see the action, you learn to say this ball should do this, and then look at the ball and determine what you saw and determine if it was correct. And I've learned to do that. My students that I work with now sometimes are a little bit, I'll call it flabbergasted, where I can see that they took the club back. It was perfectly on plane, perfect position at the top. And I go, that's perfect. They swing and the ball goes dead straight because I've learned how to watch the golf club. I don't need to look at a video of their swing to be able to say, you see how good that was. I see it in real time exactly as it's happening. And that's what Manuel taught all of his students, to watch the golf club, observe what happens. So there's no guessing involved.
Interesting. What do you think would be the greatest piece of teaching advice that Manuel gave to you that kind of is the forefront of your mind whenever you're giving a lesson?
I would say truly, and this might sound a little funny, but his time and his caring. The time that he spent getting me to understand what it was, his caring for me to get me to understand it. You know, when we would work together, even when I would work on my golf swing, he never ever said no to one of his assistants when they were asking for help on their golf game. So the caring that I put into my students and that, I'll call it that energy or that passion, is what I learned from him as much as anything. It's, you know, like, it's really hard to describe, but if I don't feel I put 100% into a lesson, and as long as I've been away from Manuel and since his passing, I still feel somehow that I let him down if I don't feel I did 100%. So that's how much he impacted me personally and my caring for students.
That's really awesome.
It really does. You know, I was, and I hope I don't get teary-eyed with this, but I was very fortunate that he had had a stroke a long time ago. And I was on my way to a tournament, but I took 4 days, and I spent 4 days with him when he was in the rehab center and gave his daughter a break from not having to go and take care of him every day. And then when he was in the final days of his life, his daughter called me, and I was able to be there in hospice with him before he passed away. So, you know, he was it was, and I say for me, it was an honor that the family allowed me to do some of that. But
Absolutely.
It was also for me, it truly was an honor for me to have worked for him. And to see somebody who, he had the passion for the swing. He knew that I had the passion for it, and he did what I think is he put the extra effort into me to help me understand so much that I don't know, so much that I could never repay him for what he's done for me.
Well, you are, by teaching, you know, keeping his legacy alive,
Right.
by teaching his method. So you're doing him a great service.
And I even laugh, and I thought about it as my first day when I went to work for him, he asked me if I could give him the definition of a swing. And I started off with something like, well, it's when you, and he goes, no. And then I said, well, it's maybe wet, and he goes, no. And after about 15 minutes of getting no's, he said to me, here's your homework assignment for tonight. He said, go home, look up in Webster's dictionary the definition of a swing. I figured, okay. I got home, I grabbed the dictionary, I flipped it to swing. You know what the definition of a swing is? It is a to and fro action. I said, there's more to it than that. I went to the encyclopedia and I looked up swing. It didn't have very much to say. It said it was an action that went backward and forward. I then went to the public library that was 2 blocks from where I live. Went in there, I asked the gentleman behind the counter, I said, I need to find in physics what a swing is. And he goes, well, it's a back and forth action. So I went to work the next day. Manuel said, you know what a swing is? I said, yes, it's a to and fro movement. He said, that is correct. He says, do you think you can teach somebody to make the club go to and fro? I said, well, yes. He said, now there's more to it because it's a club, but you're teaching people to make an action that goes back and forth. And I've spent from that day forward, I mean, just something that simple.
But it's not. Why do we make it so complicated?
Well,
And you're making it so simple.
I think personally, and this is not meant to be a shot at any teacher or anywhere, but I think some teachers try to make it so complicated that when the student can't do it, they don't feel that they're responsible for it. Students, and what Manuel believed very strongly was that if you're going to teach, your job is to communicate. So if a student fails, it's not the student's fault, it's your fault. So I learned that. And there are funny things, okay? So when you think about this now, and I'll kind of make the swing again, it's a to and fro action. So you hear people say, swing it back and then down. Well, first of all, if something goes back, it doesn't go down, it goes forward.
It's forward.
That's right. So now you're telling somebody to make a downswing, which is very vertical, and people always say their swing is too steep. Well, because they're visualizing it as going downward. Now we go beyond that. You want to send a golf ball forward, but people tell you to hit down on it. And when you hit down on it, you hear teachers say the more you hit down on it, the more it goes up. If that was true, I would hit a nail into the floor and it would go into the ceiling. I mean, think about it. That would,
Yes.
but it doesn't happen like that. I watched a gentleman on the Golf Channel the other day, and he said that golf is a game of de-lofting. You're always trying to de-loft the golf club. Well, then the ball's never going to go in the air.
Right.
I hear people talk about forward shaft lean. There is no such thing. The swing does move forward, but the entire club moves forward. If you lean the shaft forward, and anybody who's listening to this or watching this, if the person can take the golf club, set up to it, push the grip forward, look what happens to the club head. It either goes to the right or it de-lofts. Well, if the club de-lofts or moves to the right, they're not getting either the height they want or the direction. Now, if we go back to swing, any action that swings, by definition, passes back through its original starting position. Where did the club start? On the ground behind the ball. That's where it returns. You know, so there are so many nuances with it where people try to sound, and I hate to say they try to sound good, but they're not using common sense. They're not understanding physics. They're trying to create all of these, I don't know, they're creating their own phrases. And those phrases that they create make them be unique, but they're not helping the student. I laugh. Even sometimes I teach a gentleman who's an engineer. And he asked me, he said, I'm trying to create more power. So I asked him, I said, well, just in a nutshell, could you give me the definition of power? And he said it's a transmission of energy from one source to another. Okay. So I said, so when you swing the golf club, if it doesn't hit the ball, did you create more power? He goes, well, no. I said, that's right. You create speed. So the more you learn to generate speed, that speed becomes, quote, power only when the club hits the ball. So if you make a swing, and then again, I go a little backwards, when you hear people talk on TV, he's a very powerful swinger. No, he's a fast swinger. And that's where you see all the things that guys are working with today, which I do agree with, is they're working with, like, I think it's called super speed, which are the weighted clubs that help them generate more speed. They're teaching themselves to generate speed. Now, that speed, when it strikes the golf ball, is a more powerful action, but they don't produce power.
Wow. Fascinating. Sometimes, and I don't want to slam anybody who's a PGA instructor, but sometimes I kind of think that they don't want to give a student the final answer because they need to stay in business. They need to keep these lessons going. So they're not always going to be, give you the reasons you need or the help that you need that moment. Yeah, I know they're like trying to get you in and out, but...
Well, you could be correct on that, but I will tell you point blank, for me, I have, and I don't want to say more business than I can handle, but when I have a student, I get referrals from students. And I'm pretty unique in my teaching, we'll call it idea. If you came to me for a lesson, my first lesson with you is no charge. Now, that's because I believe in two things, or a few things. I believe, one, you're already nervous and uncomfortable taking a lesson. So I can't get as much out of you the first time as I can in future lessons. So I don't charge you for the first lesson so that you can see what we can do and then build off of that. And in the last, and I would say, since I started that, about 8 years ago, I have never had a student not come back.
Wow. Because they're feeling guilty?
No, I think that I think they understand that they see improvement, but they already know they were nervous. So they know they couldn't quite do it because they were trying to impress me with what they could do. And I get them to understand, don't impress me with what you do, show me what you do. So it's a different mentality.
Fascinating. So that first lesson that people can get for free, that you're at GarySowinskiGolf.com.
Correct.
And it's SOWINSKI.
Correct.
And I will leave a link in the show notes for your website. Tell me what we'll find when we get there.
Well, you'll find a little bit of, I'll call it my pricing, my teaching concept, a little bit of what we do or what I do, and an opportunity if people want, they can email me and send me a video if they want, and I will critique their video and send it back to them. I spend a lot of time doing that, and I teach quite a few people that I knew when I was in the Chicago area, and even people who know that I teach Manuel's concept. They send me videos, and I just, no charge, I'll just reply back to them and just say, hey, look, this is what I see. This is what I recommend. I'll call them on the phone to kind of talk them through it, or tell them to call me at certain times just so that they understand. And then I'm surprised sometimes I get a lot of people who fly out they'll come out for a week to vacation here, and they take a couple lessons and then go home.
That's incredible. Well, it's amazingly generous of you, and you obviously have a lot to share because you were taught by one of the best.
Oh, not one of, the best.
Wow. Okay, you heard it here first. Gary, It was great talking to you. Thanks so much for your time and for your insights.
Well, thank you very much, Fred. I greatly appreciate it. And anytime you want anything, holler.
Well, I want to make a special thank you to BJ Barger from Alexandria, Virginia, who's one of our senior Golf Smarter ambassadors. She's not a new one because she joined me and other listeners for our Golf Smarter adventure to Prague back in September of 2009. Now, BJ now has a choice of gifts, just providing us with a homemade recording of today's intro. You too can win a Golf Smarter gift and have a choice of which you'd prefer, and here's all you have to do. Send an email to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com and request the simple instructions to leave a voicemail at our toll-free Golf Smarter line. And when you do, you can choose a dozen balls with the Golf Smarter logo from Odin Golf, the golf brand that sponsors and pays everyday golfers. Now, these tour quality balls are a fraction of the price of what you'd usually pay. And when you use the code GolfSmarter at checkout, you'll receive an additional 20% off the order. I mean, it's a win-win and win. Their link is in today's show notes. Now, you also have an option to receive a private online link to Tony Manzoni's video of the Lost Fundamental. And then your third choice is a new glove and glove storage compartment from redroostergolf.com, the unique glove subscription service that offers many styles of gloves in 26 sizes. So just go ahead and send an email, and I'll get back to you with those simple instructions of what to do and what to say. Write to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com or click on the Hey Fred button at golfsmarter.com. So here's the latest update on our video productions to complement each new podcast episode. It seems like we're getting a lot more play from these 1-minute tips and these insights that come right out of the episodes. So as we progress, I'm going to be trying to post at least one and hopefully 3 or 4 each of these tips on YouTube as a YouTube short, on Instagram, and on TikTok. So please subscribe to @GolfSmarter on your favorite platform and take advantage of these short and helpful video tips. Some fun stuff coming up in the next few weeks on Golf Smarter. Kerry Valentine told me this morning that he's headed back to the Sony Open to capture interviews with PGA Tour players during their practice rounds. So we'll get to hear those conversations as we have the last couple years. And then in a couple weeks, I'll start sharing interviews from the PGA Merchandise Show in Orlando, looking for great and unique products, club makers, interesting people, and of course, some of our old friends who've been on the show before, but I finally get to meet in person. And coming in March and April on Golf Smarter Mulligans, we'll kick off the new golf season by replaying all of our interviews with our legendary instructor, Tony Manzoni. I've been telling you for years, we get more email and requests for information about Tony than any other featured teacher. And Golf Smarter is the only place on the web that you can get a full dose of Tony's incredible insights. So thank you for your continued support, and stay tuned for another full year, our 18th, of entertaining and educational golf instruction and content in 2023. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for upcoming episodes, please click on that Hey Fred button at golfsmarter.com.